Session date, April 14, 2016. Series, Vinci. Session title, What is Vinci? Presenter, Scott Duvall. This is an unedited transcript of this session. As such, it may contain omissions or errors due to sound quality or misinterpretation. For clarification or verification of any points in the transcript, please refer to the audio version posted at www.hsrd.research.va.gov/cyberseminars/catalog-archive.cfm. Female 1, I want to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Scott Duvall. Dr. Duvall is the director of Vinci, located at the VA of Salt Lake City Healthcare System, and also is a research assistant professor in internal medicine and pharmacotherapy with the University of Utah. Dr. Duvall, can I turn things over to you? Dr. Scott Duvall, absolutely, thank you. So, what we're planning on talking about today is something that's near to my heart. And sometimes when you are too close to something, you start describing it in ways that you think everybody else already understands. This became particularly clear to me as I was on a call with some colleagues from the Department of Defense. And I have never heard as many acronyms. I thought in the VA that we were known for acronyms, but I got an education there. So, the impetus for this cyber seminar is to take a step back and to describe an overview of Vinci. And as you saw in the announcement, some of you are using it. Some of you are yet to use it or want to use it. There are some things that you may absolutely love about it, and there are some things you don't quite yet. And so, this fits in this series of Vinci cyber seminars where we're trying to make sure that we've got an open dialogue, where we're trying to describe what we're doing, we're listening to what our users are using Vinci for, struggling with, what they're succeeding in. And we want to better support you to succeed and triumph within those successes. So, I'm going to start off with Vinci stands for the VA Informatics and Computing Infrastructure. The leadership and the staff associated with Vinci are spread throughout the country. Salt Lake does have a big presence, and that's where I'm located. But we have important leaders in Washington, D.C., in Nashville, Tennessee, in Pittsburgh, in Little Rock. And so, what we're presenting is a program that has many folks from around the country who are working to provide a place for your research to succeed. There's a big team that's involved and they work hard. And I want to start this cyber seminar with an acknowledgement of how grateful I am to work with this amazing Vinci team. So, let's start off with some definitions of Vinci. I want you to know that our mission is to improve the compliance, efficiency, and quality of research. Sometimes you may see that these three goals, compliance, efficiency, and quality, may be competing, and we found that as well in a big environment like VA. Sometimes compliance and efficiency and quality are at odds. And so, we have some very hardworking and dedicated people in Vinci and in other organizations that we partner with to try and navigate this space so that we can try and meet these three missions. And the way that we do that is with services and innovations that are supporting then, receiving and properly using, and analyzing healthcare data. We are an HSR&D resource center, and we are a service-directed resource center. So, we are a resource that is supporting your research. So, that's kind of the overall mission, the big picture. Let me break that down into an elevator pitch to describe Vinci. It's the data application, services, and computing within a central, secure location in the VA Internet. So, those are our the four pillars of Vinci are data, applications, services, and computing. And our thrust in the different tasks, and projects, and partnerships that we form fall into one of these four main pillars. The data inside VA is truly amazing, and I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but let me give you just a quick overview of data that's available in Vinci. I've listed here an article, as I've recently gone over again because it has a lot of detail and I think it does a really good job of showing ways that VA is pushing forth science, technology, informatics inside of healthcare. So, this is an article by Dr. Steve Finn. It includes Jack Bates, who's the director of the Business Intelligence Service line, which houses the Corporate Data Warehouse. So, you may know the Corporate Data Warehouse is a key data source inside of Vinci. So, CDW does have operational partners. That's their big push. That's why the CDW is created in one of the enclaves, sort to speak, or one of the functions of the Business Intelligence Service line, and CDW is to provide support for research. So, they are a fantastic source of data. One of the things that's interesting about CDW data is it's changed the way that we do research and the way we look at research. Many of you have been in VA for many years and you've known that local research has always been rather simple. There's only a few choices, only a few local codes, only a few people you have to talk with to make sure that you've got everything you need, and the expertise that you need to get your projects done. With the transfer from local research to national research, there's of course been files available for years. Specialty files or data that's been created for specific purposes, operation purposes that have been available for research use. But CDW brings the availability of data, the level of granularity, and the completeness and availability of data to a whole new level inside VA. So, obviously the VA credentials research groups. But the difference between what's available before in some of these specialty files and what's available in, at least the domains that have been extracted through the CDW process, is, now you're dealing with 130 different systems across the United States. The level of granularity and specificity, the number of local codes that are used across these different sites, can provide entirely new level of understanding of the data. Now we'll talk about that in a little bit, to appropriately use it and to really understand the data on a local level, on this national level. There's about 23 million patients who are contained there. Somewhere between 7 and 9 million that are seen in VA healthcare institutions across about 1,600 points of care, which include medical centers, outpatient clinics, and other places where services are offered. What that is, it translates into a turnover of new patients that are being added. Of the total that are seen in a given year, almost 1 million of them are new to the VA system each year. We do have incredible amounts of data in terms of administrative data. So, this includes diagnosis codes, this includes visits, this includes who they saw, who our veterans saw, what floor, and what was done in terms of procedures and other things. And so, we have several billion records if you look at procedures. There's about 750,000 new procedures added every single day with a total of about 3 billion. The number of lab tests that we get on the order of just under 2 million new lab results per day, a total of 7.2 billion. We have clinical notes that have details, discharge summaries, imaging reports, and biopsy reports, progress notes. We've got about 3 billion clinical notes with just under 1 million new notes generated throughout the national VA system every day. We also have some wonderful specialty and linked data sets that are available through partnerships that can be used on Vinci, and that includes other data sources that you've heard cyber seminars on, including CMS data that VIRC provides and has the data stored over. and other data sets including registries, or the data sets you may collect, or that other groups may house that can be brought into the Vinci environment and linked to the data. The number of applications that are available on Vinci continues to grow. We do have things, the regular Microsoft Office suite and your ability to write, and create tables, and look at aggregate data, prepare reports, those kinds of things, join hand in hand with the statistical tools. And there's several options. SAS is a popular application used on Vinci. And then we have a growing number of users and some exciting new technology on the forefront with R and so, parallel versions of R that may be available coming up in the future. We have some administrative tools to help transfer data back and forth or transfer data between different formats. We have a suite of tools that allow you to manage data, view, and explore, and query data, and SQL Server Management Studio is a popular tool inside the Vinci environment to get in and understand the data. It's used for a lot of data management tasks to select patient populations and cohorts, ready for analysis. There are some main services that Vinci offers and one of those is done in partnership with a couple more organizations, and I'll mention vinci again. Sater PH is helping with the Vinci Cyber Seminars. These other resource centers and these other resources inside VA, we're partnering with to make sure that education and training covers all of the skills and the data, and the tool sets that you need to master, to be effective in research in VA. Another great source of training is CDW themselves, has monthly trainings where they focus on a different domain of data and update the policies and procedures, describe the data elements, help kind of describe the provenance of the data and any issues that might be there. We do have a help ticket system that anything you're struggling with, or specific requests for training or access, or getting your study started, how to use some of the applications, how to use the environment. We've got a great team of what we call concierges, that helps with all the education with helping with, answering some of these trouble tickets. And it also provides assistance when you have questions or when something about your study requires additional data access or regulatory compliance. We've got a great team of concierges that can meet with you, work with you, help understand what your goals are, explain what the current processes for doing similar things are, and then even help work through issues when you are pushing the boundaries and doing something new. We have a great data services team. Some of the popular services that are used are help with preparatory research or study feasibilities. And what this often entails is investigators or research groups are planning on either undertaking a project or submitting a proposal for funding, and they want some additional evidence just to make sure VA has the data they're interested in. So, some of these might be as simple as, do you know if we have any information on microbiology? And some might be a little bit more complex that say, can you tell me if we have any diabetic patients who are on metformin and who have had a hemoglobin A1C greater than 7 the last 6 months? These are some of the types of questions that we get and provide that assistance to investigators and research groups who are looking to do some work and perform a study, but are in the preparatory phases. And then finally, an important piece of using the Vinci environment is having somebody who can provide you with the data sets that you're looking for. And so, the data provisioning process includes when you come to Vinci you have some project space and we communicate with you, what type of data your study needs. We look at the approvals that you've got, and help you kind of narrow down that first slot of the study population, the first set of filters to get down to a set of data that you have approval for, so that you can do the final steps of creating and validating your study population, and performing your research study. So, that is the services aspect of things. And then finally the computing aspect, is the environment that hosts it all, that hosts the data together with the tools together, with your project space so that you can have these things all in one place and have the computing power to analyze the data. In addition to these four pillars of the work that the Vinci Center focuses on, we have two particular special projects that crimps all four of those pillars. And I'll tell you quickly about both of those. So, first is, working to standardize and map these data that's available in VA, into a common data model. And what we've done is, over the past several years we've investigated several different data models, we've worked with different communities, we've seen the types of things that are happening, and what we've decided to do was focus on one of these community standards that's shown a lot of promise and has a lot of community support both in academia and other healthcare systems, and other organizations. And it's called OMOP. Observational, Medical Outcomes, partnership with the original group that got together and created this common data model. I'm showing just a snapshot here of the entire data model. If you focus on the left of the screen, you see the standardized clinical data, it's a shade of blue. What this does is it has several elements that you're familiar with and many of the core pieces of information that you might have used in CDW data or in Inaudible 19 minutes and 4 seconds data, or in other data sets that you specialize with. They have these domains modeled and standardized. What that means, for example, if you're going to use medications, what you do inside of the CDW is you go to the outpatient medications, of course, that's a large table where a lot of medication data is. But if you're looking across inpatient and outpatient, or if you're looking across certain classes of medication that may be administered in an inpatient setting or infusions, or these other types, then you have to look in a couple other data tables. And so, you look in BCMA, the barcode medication administration that happens in the inpatient data. And that's split out between the drugs that are expensed in the 4 additives and the 4 solutions. And then finally, you wrap in information that's stored in the outpatient procedures table that describes the hex PEXPH code, or some of the infusions and other specialty type of medications that are recorded in that table. That's good to do. The fact that these are split out and the fact that you can go in and dive down and get what you need is great. The data is there. What we've done with the OMOP common data model is we are able to take all of those data sources and load them into the drug exposure table. We are able to look at each of the different local codes that are used for drugs and medications, and are able to map them to the RX form standards. So, that it doesn't matter if it was coded in the system with NDC or with a VA drug class or without a VA drug class, it doesn't matter if Salt Lake calls this medication something different than Denver. We've got these mapped to standardized concepts defined in national terminologies and ontologism. So, that's the mapping aspect, that's the standardization aspect. One of the things in that light. You know that the way data may be stored and linked is done on local identifiers. And so, you have a local identifier for a patient, for each place that they've been and you join the data on that local identifier. But then in research, you always need to roll that up to count for people who might have been seen at more than one site. As part of the standardization process, Vinci uses the best practices that are published by CDW, that are talked about in the research guidebooks and other documents published by vinci to roll that up for you and give you the best view of the patient, the best view of the patient's demographics, etc., according to these standards. Then the wonderful thing about the common data model is you can use it, it's got tools associated with it, and you can use it as the source for your research. Let's say that there's a data domain that you have outside or you've collected through surveys or other means. What we've done is, in the transform process, we keep the link to the CDW data. And so, anytime you need to join or link, or use other data sources, you can go right to the source of the data and do those links, and make sure you can either just use the common data model, or you can use everything at your fingertips there. That's an exciting special project that we're looking at. We've got the OMOP common data model available to folks who want to beta test it, and we'll make it available to everybody through the DOPPH process later in the year. Another one of those special projects we've been focusing on is natural language processing. What I'm showing here is a chart of the tool that's been developed to allow manual review and annotation of clinical charts. You can see that it looks or could look. You can format it so it looks like whatever view of the medical record you want to see. You can configure it so it has different views and different data elements, and you can switch between those. Then what you're doing is you're viewing the medical record, and then you also have the ability to add structured data or to highlight parts of the chart as evidence, or to build your case that this patient meets your study criteria, or other types of things. We're piloting this for qualitative coding as well, and it's available for use within the Vinci environment. One of the things that we've also done is we've linked the chart of tools with other natural language processing tools. And so, if you have a tool that's an output, or if you have some algorithms that can help the manual review process become more efficient, or partner with it, we can do things that allow you to do some of the process in an automated natural language processing work, and then you can add to that some of the manual chart review tasks. We've started a process where given some natural language processing tools that we're making available, but that don't meet VA security requirements for release. We're working with some contractors to try and make those available so that they can meet the VA security requirements. In the meantime, what we can do is we can use some of these tools in a controlled contained environment and process documents. Then make the output of those documents available, and looking for ejection fraction was one of the first data elements that we've done. So, that instead of having to run natural language processing on a group of patients, the study population to get that data, we have the process where we've run it on all of the patients already, and it can be used as a structured data set joined with whatever other study information you have. One last thing I'll talk about here is that we are helping coordinate development efforts in VA. So, there's many folks who are research teams that are developing fantastic new algorithms. There are some open source algorithms being used. And so, what we're trying to do is coordinate between these people who are developing algorithms and tools, and the group that works with compliance of tools and security inside VA, so that we can come up with a standard, that if you follow these certain steps we'll be able to release tools that are developed internally a lot easier, etc. So, that's the coordination piece that we are working through. From the available tools, we already mentioned chart review, but MetaMap is being scheduled for release. And so, what we've done is we've set up a system that will be able to take requests to use MetaMap, and that should be launching in the next 2 months or so. If you have need of using a natural language processing system like MetaMap, I would be happy to take your requests and see how we could accommodate that inside Vinci. Alright, so, I talked about the mission, I've given you the elevator pitch of your 4 pillars that we focus on, I've talked about our special projects that we're working on. Now I'm going to tell you a little about organization. Vinci was created. It was funded in 2008. It was actually split off from an existing program project. When that was being discussed, it was the Consortium for Healthcare Informatics Research. Sure. When that project was created, a lot of the focus of all of the groups that would be part of the CHR program would be including text. And so, one of the thoughts was that we need some place to gather the text. We need some computing environment to process it. And then this evolved into a way to get a central secure place inside VA to conduct research altogether. From the get-go though, this program project was a partnership between HSR&D and Ointment. And this partnership was due in part to things that have happened in VA, where Congress, because of a data breach, Congress pulled IT functions outside of research and created an office where IT could be overseen and managed. So, from the very beginning it's a little different from many resource centers. In the fact that we've got these 2 organizations, these 2 departments, these 2 offices represented in the creation of it. Now, more so than this, it's evolved from a program project to one of VA's major initiative, the Informatics Initiative to help services, research, and development of resource centers. What that looks like now is there are 3 acting organizations involved in funding, maintaining, creating, keeping the lights on as what you know of Vinci. The orange box at the bottom left is HSR&D. We do receive funding as a resource center, similar to VIREC and SADR-PH and others. We have specific purposes to make research resources available to HSR&D researchers and their primary goal there. Inside the Office of Information Technology, there's 2 branches and one is focused on operations and maintenance. We call that sustainment. And the other branch is focused on creating new features, new products. It's called product development. So, the 3 different groups here. Inside the HSR&D box you might be familiar with Vinci team members such as Jeff Sennett. You might be familiar with, he handles much of our regulatory things. You may be familiar with Debbie Eddy, who helps with some of our other compliance things and then helps run our Vinci user advisory group. You may be familiar with Kevin Malohi, or some of our data managers that help with feasibilities. These are the types of people and the names you might hear here. Others including education and that reach. I know when you call for help desk you might speak with Inaudible 31 minutes and 50 seconds or Jim Potter. This is the Vinci team members in the orange box. In the middle blue box, the IT containment, you might be familiar with names like Ozzy Toronto PH. You might be familiar with Inaudible 32 minutes and 2 seconds or the data provisioners who help your data, which include Ryan and Greg, and Inaudible 32 minutes and 11 seconds. A great team there. On the product development side, we have other members and many of these don't do customer-facing type things, but names like Angela, and Craig, and Jerome, and Aaron, are some of the team members in that box. For all of the rest of the team members, we are grateful for you and you may have recognized other team members and we can help you figure out which box they fall into. But this is the Vinci family. The green boxes at the top represent the stakeholders in the Vinci Governance Board. So, we do have folks like Jim Breeling PH from ORD PH, Steve Finn from OABI, John Quinn from National Data Systems, Denise Hines from VIREC, and Jonathan Nebiker PH from OA, and Vista PH Evolution Platform. This team there, again with Jack Bates from RETPH and myself from HSR&D, along with David Atkins, represent the stakeholders that provide governance, direction, and oversights to the Vinci program. So, let me put that in a couple of different ways to help clarify how all these things work together. I'll start there with HSR&D. We've got this group as part of the Resource Center and here are some of the tasks that we are working on. We mentioned some of these as part of our pillars or special projects: standardization, data transformation. We provide training, education services. We also take feedback and work with the users in our user advisory group, and others to receive requirements, to set priorities on how things should be done, and to take prototypes or to develop prototypes for what we may use. As you know, Vinci is much more than that. Just the very foundation of what we do is keep the lights on, the operations and maintenance of the project spaces, the provisioning data, deploying applications, architecting an environment that can handle its use. We develop new products and we deploy products. So, outside of research you can see there are many tasks that are accomplished. I'm overlaying then these other groups and added a few to show that the top layer of what we do is driven by partnerships, driven by our coins, our centers of innovation and research, individual research groups that we work with, the CDW team, many others that help drive and set requirements, and are helping in innovating, and training, and educating. All of this family here, this Vinci team depends on and is here for the Vinci users. That covers all of these territories. Our Vinci users then are important to use, they're the reason we exist. And so, your involvement and your feedback, and your help in trying to set the direction or defining the needs is critical to Vinci's success. Let me tell you a little about some of our users. Currently we have 6,500 users of Vinci. That does include maybe some of you listening to the call that are investigators or other types of people who have a Vinci account but don't use it. You may direct research or you may design the studies and other things, but you may have programmers, analysts, or inaudible 36 minutes and 46 seconds that are on there. This does include everybody who has an account on Vinci, 6,500. Let me tell you a little about how that works. You see that for the past 2 fiscal years, from 13 to 14 and from 14 to 15, we had grown more than 1,500 users per year. But we're 6 months into Phi-16 and we've already almost reached that. We're at 1,200 new users in Phi-16 so far. What this means is, this is a record-breaking year for us. Our planning and our thoughts are now taking into account this much larger growth than expected. We are still in a very rapid growth period. You can see that as well from projects. We have grown more than 400 projects between 14 and 15, and then now since the end of Phi-15 we already have 351 new projects. We are setting records all around and then same, we currently have 1,100 requests. These include requests for changes, or trouble tickets, or a request for education, etc. We're at 1,200 already in Phi-15 we had 1,600, and so, we're on schedule to be about 700, little under 700 more service requests than we've had the year before. Let's keep talking about what our Vinci users look like and I'll start this with what an ideal Vinci user looks like. So, work with me for just a minute on this idea. The ideal Vinci user is an expert with data, not only how to use it but what it means, how to translate real-world concepts into what's stored in this secondary use electronic medical record and other sources of data. Not only can they use data but it's optimized. So, their queries run lightning fast. They know exactly how to query large tables so that it doesn't impact other people who are using the databases. The subject matter expertise experts, that lets them know how the data should be used, what population they're looking for, exactly what that population should look like, and they're just adding the data to support their hypotheses. They understand the difference between working with hundreds of patients versus millions of patients, and what that really means in the complexity, and the 5 V's for big data that we have, and how you need to analyze big data differently than traditional methods. They are folks who understand statistical methods, study designs, they are experts in using SAS, SQL, or R, or these other technologies both for data management and for analysis. Not only are they experts in using them but they are well versed in the best practices and only use best practices when using Vinci. You're all on mute, I didn't hear any of your reactions. Let me come back and say, so if that's the ideal Vinci user, what about the rest of us? The rest of us including myself don't meet high margin, every single one of those categories myself. So, what about the rest of us, how do we survive? One of the things I think is important to understand is, to succeed in Vinci, it's good to know what Vinci can do, what Vinci is funded to do, and what our scope allows us to do, and what you can do to succeed. What are the parts you're expected to do if you'd like to perform research inside Vinci? So, number 1, what can Vinci do? This is what we can do. This is our standard procedure, we'll give you a space in which to play. We'll give you data with which to do your approved research and your approved projects. When you run into issues we'll help you troubleshoot. We'll point you to information resources. We'll help you make sure that you know that there are best practices out there, there are these websites to help explain the data. We spend a lot of time in the data. That is true but as you can see from the listserv and many other places, there are many experts throughout VA and many have slices of knowledge. So, if you want to know exactly what a particular raw domain contains or where to get this particular variable or piece of information you need for your study, I guarantee there's an expert in the VA that can answer that one question. That person may not know some of the answers to some of the other questions or the context in which you may use it in your particular study. Don't rely on Vinci for that either. One of the important things that we want people to do is to know that when it comes to provisioning data and others, we don't have the authority to engage in research. If we were to partner on a research project, what we'd have to do is get an IRB just like you would, and we'd partner and be co-investigators on the study. That's not feasible and we don't have funding to do that for all the projects that we support, but we can provide you the place, we can provide you the data, we can point you to information resources and then obviously, getting access to or making sure the regulatory pieces are involved, those are core Vinci tasks that we can help you with. So, then what's left? What I'm showing here, is that the entire research workflow when you're using the complexity of data that we have inside VA, the size of data inside VA, and just a national system which comes with so many data sources and changes across time, and policy changes and other things, you are walking into a vast wonderful treasure trove but it takes some digging to get out the diamonds. The data that's available in provisions inside Vinci isn't in the analytics file stage. As a researcher myself one of the things that I say is, I think it's unfortunate that physicians when they're documenting things in the medical record, they don't take into account all the good research questions that I'd like to ask. They're not recorded in exactly the right way that I need it to be. Going through the whole research workflow involves data management, involves transformation of data, involves validation, it involves truly understanding what your data means and that it reflects what you think it does to be successful. That includes a set of skills to transform the data to program, that to create your analytics file. Then once you've got your analytic files, then the model building and the other statistical analysis can happen. When you're using these great VA data resources, know that what you can do is plan for the entire research workflow and make sure that you've got members of your team that can do each of those different parts. We have a philosophy here at Vinci that we take the data as it is, we trust but verify. And so what we need to do is make sure the data is what we think it is, and it means what we think it does, and we can do this by understanding the target population that we're looking for, make sure we know how the care workflow happens, where they bounce back and forth inside VA, because where they visit VA and how they visit inside VA, determines what data is created. Then when you have that data delivered to you, you can compare those, what you're observing in the data that's provisioned with your expectation as you've investigated the study population and the workflow to see if those match as a validation and a check to make sure that your data or research will be valid. A few more quick points. We do have best policies of use and so, best practices are available. You can look at the introduction of policies produced by the CDW team to better understand how to work inside Vinci. To do this then, to be successful if you're building your team to be partners, find partners with complementary skill sets so that you've got everything you need, ask questions, seek resources, and the bottom line is use it responsibly. I'll end with some thoughts about you and Vinci. Vinci and I. We want to work with our users, take their feedback, and here are some ways we interact with our VA community, our Vinci users, to work towards transparency and to allow you to get feedback. Every time I go to Washington, D.C., I see in the subways, I see in the airport, the slogan from Homeland Security that says if you see something, say something. We're really working to make sure that we take your feedback and that we can look for solutions for that. For example, some themes that we've heard and worked with as we've tried to gather feedback is that there's insufficient documentation and training resources. We're working with partners now to try and increase the documentation and the training offerings. One of the things that we've been able to do though, and we'd love to have your feedback on how it's made a difference, is we've put together a framework in a revamped Vinci Central site, where we are trying to make things easier to find. We're putting things in video format and making cyber seminars, and other types of things available at your fingertips. We're working to put definitions and user guides, and other things. Then from here we've got other great information resources like the VHA data portal page, and the CDW page, and the VIREC pages there. Another theme that's come is sometimes the environment performance is slower than desired. One of the things that I'll share here is that we've got a copy of our static data and we've got a copy of live data. Most of our data sets, our studies are divided between these two servers. What we're doing in the next few weeks is we're launching a second live server, which will balance the load for the amount of users and the studies that are there. We've got another plan within a year, maybe a late summer or early fall, where we'll have a third live server available. We're working for new configurations to better balance load and study data, and then we've got some very smart people in IOD and ONIT working to see what opportunities there are for VA and Vinci in the cloud. I'm going to show some other themes that we're working on right now. We don't have the answers for all quite yet, but we continue to love to hear your feedback, and we want you to know that we're hearing what you're stating and we're working towards solutions. We're hardening some of our environment, we're providing a failover system, and trying to monitor usage and work from there. So, I'll leave it at that and I'll say, I'd love to answer some of your questions and I appreciate you attending today. Female 1, great. Thank you. We do have several pending questions here, so we'll just start at the top and work our way through. Are there any plans to include MS Visio with the other Office apps? Dr. Scott Duvall, that's a great question. I will definitely add that to the list and I'll get back to you on the possibility of including that in Vinci. Female 1, great, thank you. The next question, how does one request access to the OMOP cleaned and standardized data? Is this data different from the main CDW production and raw domains? Dr. Scott Duvall, the answer is yes. We're currently in our beta phase. Eventually you'll see that in the Dart application as a checkbox that you can ask to get access for that. If you're interested in participating in this beta environment, you can send an email to vinci@va.gov and you'll be contacted by Jeff Sennett, who will help walk you through the regulatory aspects. And we've got now a small but growing group of beta testers who are providing great feedback, helping iterate the data mapping, and make the data model even better. We would welcome your participation in that. Female 1, great, thank you. The next question, is the MLP software available for us to use? Dr. Scott Duvall, the currently available tools include chart review. You can request data that's already been processed, and right now that includes injection fraction. We do have some other data elements that groups have worked on or have algorithms for that we can process on demand. And then the MetaMap server will be available within 2 months or so. One of the things that we're working towards through groups like our user advisory group and hearing from the community is, which tools you'd like to prioritize, which tools you'd like to be made available first. Send your comments and tell us what your needs are. There are some needs we can handle immediately and others that we'll put into our long-term planning and prioritize that way. Female 1, okay, next question. For MLP we have to go through Vinci but may be available for us on the server in 2 months? Dr. Scott Duvall, send your specific MLP questions to vinci@va.gov. You'll be contacted by Olga Patterson or Ben Inaudible 00:53. Answer any specific questions that you have. Female 1, great, thank you. Will this wonderful documentation be available outside the VA firewall? Dr. Scott Duvall, that is a good question. I know that VA works in an environment where we partner with a lot of academic groups. Many of our users spend time off campus and off the VA network at a university or other place. We are working through that. Currently, we do have a VA Pulse group that is surrounding the OMOP data model specifically that can be accessed inside and outside VA. And then some of the other documents can be downloaded through VA or accessed through the Citrus Access Gateway. Female 1, great, thank you. I understand that there have been some issues about completeness of note extraction from medical record review. How are those issues being resolved to assure complete data? Dr. Scott Duvall, great question. That's something that we've been looking into as of yet. One of the things that it's important to know is that when you're using VA data, there are certain groups like CDW that have production data and also have raw data. With production data, these are things that have been prioritized by VA, their governance groups, and there are dedicated efforts to make sure quality and completeness are measured. For some of the raw domains, the disclaimer is as is. It's up to our research groups and users to use raw domains with caution and responsibly. In a couple of projects we're working on, we've been able to measure how much loose we have. Now we have a day of doing that. We're working on a best practice document that will allow others to know the completeness of their data set as well. We're experimenting with a couple of different ways of identifying proactively and then repulling notes that are missing. There's several prong approach partnership between Vinci, CDW, and some other interested research groups. Female 1, great, thank you. The next question, can Vinci help clinical trial researchers identify specific patients at a given medical center who could be enrolled in approved clinical trial? Dr. Scott Duvall, yes, Vinci has piloted a couple of different services and right now we're working with CSP to see if this is something that would provide value. We're working with regulatory and other points to that. If you have a specific request, send an email and we'll have a team reach out to you. We do have groups within VA who are using Vinci for that purpose, and we are doing that in partnership with CSP as well, seeing how that will work. Even if that's outside the scope of what the Vinci team can help your group with, you can use the environment to find eligible patients. Female 1, great, thank you. If we have regulatory and procedural questions, for example as an IRB contact within a specific VA, is there someone in particular with whom we could speak? Dr. Scott Duvall, yes. What we've tried to do is keep Vinci at va.gov as the point of contact. I don't know if you are tired of me saying that. Jeff Sennett is the one who leads our partnerships and regulatory aspects. He's the point of contact for the local IRB for the VA in Salt Lake City as well. So, email Vinci at va.gov, and if that ever changes they'll still get that email, but Jeff Sennett would be the one to work with you on those regulatory issues. Female 1, what normally rolls first, getting IRB approval and then submitting to Vinci for access approval or vice versa? Dr. Scott Duvall, great question, kind of a chicken and the egg. To get access to the data there's two processes. There's preparatory, which means that you do not have an IRB approval but you want to get access to the data yourself to do some of that work. Vinci can assist you with that, or instead of getting preparatory research there are some feasibility things Vinci can do on your behalf to help answer those questions. With that being said, except for those preparatory or feasibility type activities, IRB comes first and then you submit your IRB along with the DART process to request access to VA data and get a project space on Vinci. Female 1, great, thank you. We have just a couple more questions here, I'm hoping we can get through them quickly before we wrap things up here. The next question, can data be supplemented with local chart review and added into the Vinci workspace for data that cannot be pulled via a CDW and buried in progress note texts? Dr. Scott Duvall, absolutely. We have several groups using REDCap for data collection or abstraction needs. Data, as long as you have the data steward's permission for various data pieces, you can upload data into Vinci and combine it with other data sources you have approval for there. That would fall under that category. Female 1, great, thank you. Can you compare and contrast Vinci and Pyramid Analytics? Dr. Scott Duvall, so, Pyramid Analytics is a software application. You can get access to that and you go through a web browser and you can ask certain questions like, how many people have this diagnosis code? Those are great things to use for operational things, or feasibility pieces, etc. What Vinci does is it allows you to come in and use the databases that are available to find those answers as well, but then go steps further and say, okay, now this diagnosis code plus this medication, plus this lab value. Instead of being a pre-configured data mart that has these reporting capabilities which can be very useful for a prepped research and other informational and operational needs, Vinci allows you access to the underlying data that you can get those same answers for numbers, but then also use the data to look for correlations and to analyze whatever study questions that you're after. Female 1, great, thank you. Can you describe differences between a Vinci workspace and the fast grid? Dr. Scott Duvall, sure. So, let's say project space. To separate the SAS grid from a Vinci workspace, project space is your database and your project folder. That's where your data resides. A Vinci workspace is when you log on to Vinci. It may be a shared environment, the SAS grid environment. You may log into Vinci and have to remote into some of the things like SAS grid. But the workspace itself is where you see the applications. You physically are no longer looking at your computer screen, but you are looking at a view that you've remote into the Vinci environment. Then inside the Vinci environment there are SAS grids, other applications you can use within that environment that can all access your project space, your database, and your project folder. Female 1, great, thank you. And the one last, always hot question. What is the normal time for turnaround for Vinci approval? Dr. Scott Duvall, great question. It depends on what you're looking for and which data you're requesting. What we've found with just the few exceptions of people pushing the boundaries, and this is very good, research ought to push the boundaries and asking for things that are outside of the normal, that almost always, the DART request takes less time than an IRB. In Salt Lake our IRBs usually take 2 months and we've been able to see our DART processes turn around in 2 to 3 weeks time. Female 1, great, thank you. That looks like all of the pending questions we have at this time, so we will wrap things up since we are just past the top of the hour. Dr. Duvall, I really want to thank you for taking the time to prepare and present for today's session. This was a great session. I'm getting some comments in here, thank you, great program. I know people are really appreciating you putting the time into presenting today. For the audience, the next session in this series is scheduled for May 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern and Jeff Sennett will be presenting on Vinci services. We'll be getting registration information on that sent out I believe early next week. Also, I'm going to close the session out in just a moment. When I do, you will be prompted with a feedback form. Please take a few moments to fill that out. We really do read through all this feedback and use that to plan our upcoming sessions. Thank you everyone for joining us for today's HSR&D Cyber Seminar, and we look forward to seeing you at a future session. Thank you.